If Notre Dame's objective over the last 48 hours has been to be as unlikable as possible, they're doing great.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The number one sports podcast network out there is what this show is a part of. Quarterback drama and non-drama. Sam Leavitt is leaving Arizona State. Whoa on that front. And some thoughts on Jimmy Rogers leaving Washington State for Iowa State. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So Notre Dame was correctly left out of the college football playoff. Not correctly in that they weren't one of the 12 most deserving teams, but we've got auto bids. Everybody loves their auto bids. I've been against them for a while, but hey, you keep the auto bids out there. So Notre Dame feels wronged. They feel slighted. Man, the committee misled us. You know what? They kind of did. Because they led you to believe you were in and then pulled a switcheroo on the last day. And while the outcome was correct, you know that phrase, the ends justify the means? No, it really doesn't here for the committee. The end result of Miami being ahead of Notre Dame is correct. Miami getting in over BYU is incorrect. Miami being ahead of Notre Dame is indeed good for college football on a number of fronts because the committee just told you, hey, if you schedule a quality non-conference game, that is indeed going to carry some weight. And in the fallout from all of this, Notre Dame is throwing a fit. I mean, they are so wildly unlikable right now. I didn't think I'd ever say that about a Marcus Freeman-led Notre Dame team, but that's what we're going towards. So their athletic director, his name is Pete Bavaqua, I think is how you pronounce that. He said, quote, "We feel like the playoff was stolen from our student athletes," end quote. Stolen. It was stolen. It was the law was violated. Get a lawsuit going. It was stolen. I haven't heard that word come out of Provo. It would be applicable if somebody in BYU's camp said that. It is not applicable to Notre Dame's situation. If you want to say, hey, this shows why the playoff is flawed, we got to not have two group of five teams in there, that's fine. I'm probably going to agree with you on that front. But these are the rules. You may not like them. You have to abide by them, though. And for Notre Dame to say, it's stolen. And then, this is maybe my favorite part. I don't know which part exactly is. I'd have to think about that further. One of my favorite parts about this, though, is Notre Dame, their athletic director, Pete Bavaqua, said that he wasn't very happy with the ACC. That they've done irreparable harm to their relationship with Notre Dame. So hold on. Let me get this straight, Notre Dame. I really hope this isn't speaking for all of Irish fans out there, but this is the second biggest or most powerful voice that can come from the University of Notre Dame, other than Marcus Freeman, on this particular matter. You're not happy with how the ACC acted. So you were unhappy with the fact that Miami was promoted by the ACC, which they were, all week long. In the lead up to the final rankings, the ACC was showing the Miami-Notre Dame game on ACC Network, reminding people about their resume and what they've accomplished, and doing all of the things that conferences like the SEC have done for quite a while, successfully, might I add. And oh, look, it has worked in Miami and therefore the ACC's favor. And Notre Dame isn't happy about it. Irreparable harm. Dude, can you stop with the high school drama action here? You're the athletic director at Notre Dame, and you are lashing out like a child frustrated when it doesn't go his way. Can you act like a little bit of an adult? Just a scotch. Just a little bit would be really, really good. You're upset that the ACC went to bat for a team that's actually in its conference for football? Yeah, Notre Dame's an affiliate member for every other sport, but not for football. What is the ACC's obligation to Notre Dame when they're trying to get one of their own teams into the playoff because they were on the precipice of being left out of the college football playoff? How in the world is that? So you're going to go out and blast the ACC for doing something that is plainly and obviously the correct thing to do. And then you're going to turn around and at the same time make the argument, because I've seen no pending discussion about this particular idea. Are you going to make the case that Notre Dame should join a conference? Because it seems Notre Dame, specifically athletic director Pete Bavaqua, it seems, Pete, like you're envious of the fact that Miami had an entire conference infrastructure, in addition to, the head-to-head win. They had an entire infrastructure of the league office behind them making their case for them. I wonder how you could get that. I wonder. I'm not sitting here declaring Notre Dame must join a conference. No, if you want to stay out, that's your prerogative. You just don't get to cry foul when a situation like this comes about. Yes, Miami had a league push for them. This is exactly what the ACC should have done. The ACC, their comms team, their social media team deserves a round of applause because they did their job as best they could. They put out as much information as they can, and Notre Dame is out of the playoff, and Miami is into the college football playoff. And Notre Dame is sitting out the season. It's unbelievable, man. And here's the other thing. I do not buy for 1 second that every player in that Notre Dame locker room wanted to sit out the bowl game, that they decided we don't want to play another football game, that the seniors in that locker room didn't want another chance to take the field. I don't buy that for 1 second. Some might have felt that way. I don't buy for 1 millisecond that every single player in the locker room felt that way. So I've seen plenty of folks making this point. Well, they're going to stick it to ESPN. Well, they're just going to stick the entity that left them out. They're not going to give them their viewership and their money in a meaningless bowl game. Oh, man. Have you been around college athletes before? When I tell you that is the furthest thing from their mind when pondering whether or not they want to play in the bowl game. Some might not have played. That reason, I don't buy that would be near the top of the list. If you've actually been around college athletes before and talked to them, you know how little they actually pay attention to a lot of the discussions that we have in the media ecosphere. I mean, even conference realignment, when it is directly impacting a school, if you go poll a locker room to name 5 fast facts or reasons as to why a certain realignment move is taking place, you would be shocked at the correct response rate. I guarantee you. I've seen this in my own professional experience. It doesn't register. You know what they're there to do? Go to school, start building a life, and play football. That's what they're concerned about. Tell us who the opponent is. What's the scouting report? Man, this stuff is just exhausting. And by the way, there's some MOU for the playoff next year that Notre Dame, if they're ranked inside the top 12, automatically gets to go to the playoff. Completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. If Notre Dame wants to stay independent of a conference, fine. Every year should be exactly like this season. You put together your schedule. It's unique. You mostly play the ACC, who we know is in a very good conference compared to the other leagues. It's 4th of the Power 4. And if you win your big games, you'll get in, just like last year, even though you lost to Northern Illinois. There's a conspiracy again. Notre Dame got in the playoff last year, no questions asked. They hosted a playoff game with a loss to Northern Illinois. Don't give me this conspiracy, anti-Notre Dame crap. It's just dumb. It's really, really dumb. So what Notre Dame has is this agreement. And this, again, is contributing to what I talked about at the start. that if their goal is to just become really unlikable, well, yeah, they're going to do it. Here's their schedule next year. Wisconsin, Rice, Michigan State, at Purdue, at North Carolina, Navy, Miami, there you go, Boston College, SMU, Stanford, Syracuse, USC. It's the same sort of schedule this year. I hope the committee looks at all of this and says, if you don't go 11-1 or 12-0 next year, we're not putting you in the playoff. If you want the benefits of joining a conference, join a conference. But for everybody else that actually is a part of the league, you're going to get those sorts of benefits. And yep, there are perks to being Notre Dame and being an independent. That's fine. That's fine. But you don't get to then turn it around and say, well, this is so unfair. This is ridiculous. Be less like Notre Dame. Be more like Clark Lee. Clark Lee was asked about not being in the playoff. Vanderbilt is the most under-discussed playoff potential snub in the country. And on this show, that doesn't apply to BYU because I've talked about BYU plenty. They should have been in the college football playoff. BYU has a legitimate gripe. I've talked about that at length. Clark Lee, when asked about it, said, quote, "That's no one's fault except our own. We had our opportunities and we didn't do enough. We are not victims in this process. Our ownership is in coming up short. And they have emphatically decided to go play in their bowl game. Be like Clark Lee at Vanderbilt and not like Marcus Freeman in Notre Dame." That's your life lesson of the day. See that time up there for those watching on YouTube? That's a little bit longer than this first segment's supposed to be, but I'm not taking any of that out. Notre Dame's becoming a good villain again. You know what? At some level, I'm here for it. Every sport needs a good villain. Notre Dame's becoming just that. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. All of that good stuff. Sam Leavitt gone? Darn it. First, this episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way, 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And gets even better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with the code COLLEGE at checkout. So if you know somebody like me who's a big cook, or if you know somebody that just really likes having quality meats for their holiday parties, get-togethers, whatever you want to call them, Omaha Steaks is the place to go. Steaks are perfectly aged, insanely tender. It's restaurant-level stuff at your home. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. I highly suspect that Sam Leavitt is going to be a well-compensated individual in 2026. Now, I have been putting into the back burner of your minds for the last several weeks, this quarterback carousel. It's going to be crazy. The coaching carousel has been as wild as I can ever remember, certainly since I have been hosting this particular show. There have been some crazy moves. Nothing like this past cycle. The quarterback carousel is going to be just as wild. And this is the first major move. Sam Leavitt leaving Arizona State to go where? I don't know, but I can assure you it is a place with a hefty amount of cash. Because I have it on good authority that Arizona State was prepared to offer a more than competitive amount for what a college quarterback goes for nowadays. Yes, well into the millions of dollars. But Sam Leavitt, of course, led Arizona State to the college football playoff last year. And when he played a full season, he unfortunately got hurt this year, leaving Arizona State fans wondering what if. But in 13 games last year, he threw for almost 2,900 yards, completing 62% of his passes, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Began his career at Michigan State, last 2 at ASU, and unfortunately for the Sun Devils, isn't going to play another snap in the maroon and gold. So Leavitt immediately becomes one of the most highly coveted guys on the market. This is somebody who is experienced in college football, has proven he can be a part of a winning program, has proven he can be a good quarterback, and in 7 games this year, by the way, was completing 61% of his throws for over 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So I think that Sam Leavitt, even as more names go into the portal, I can't see him being outside of the top 7 quarterbacks. And I would think he winds up inside the top 5. This is one of the 5 best transfer portal quarterbacks that is likely to move teams this year. He's pretty big. Coming off an injury, there is certainly some risk there. This is not a move where Arizona State was quietly forcing him out. They wanted him to stay. He didn't want to. Someone is going to pay Sam Leavitt a lot of money. He might already know who that's going to be. The portal opens in early January. It is going to be crazy, wild, unpredictable, and yes, I will be here for it all on the show. But Leavitt's a guy that can run. Leavitt's a guy that can throw. Leavitt's a guy that can lead, and he's going to his 4th year of college. And I believe he played just 4 games in 2023 at Michigan State. This could be a 2-year investment. Now, I think he has NFL potential. I don't know if he's immediately an NFL prospect. That might depend on how his 2026 season really goes. Not just with his play, but how he looks coming off of the injury as well. So the fact that somebody like this is out there, a multi-year starting quarterback at the Power 4 level that's been to the college football playoff with a team that was picked to finish last in the preseason media poll, is out there with potentially 2 years of college football left. That could garner a hefty price tag. And given the amount of money that I've been told is likely going to come his way, I don't think he's going anywhere that isn't Big Ten or SEC. Just a guess. Unless somebody like a Florida State, Thomas Castellanos, I don't believe got another year of eligibility. Maybe FSU's coming in with big money and they want to go and get him. Just a name that pops into my head. But I don't have anything to report on where he could be headed. We'll have to wait and see. But this is the first major domino to fall. And that runs counter to what happened in Berkeley. So I have talked about this guy for quite a while because he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and he will be for the next 2 years. Jaron Keawe Sagapolutele bursts onto the scene at Cal this year. The Bears are going to a bowl game. They went 7-5. Justin Wilcox got fired after the Stanford debacle, and they've hired Tosh Lupoy, Oregon's defensive coordinator. And that guy can recruit. He can really recruit. And if he can get JKS some, wide receivers, that would be cool. Because when JKS was throwing to anyone that wasn't David DeJesus this year, boy, it felt like it was usually a lost cause. So he's a stud. To me, he's Michael Penix reincarnated just in Berkeley. And when Tosh Lupoy got to Cal, got announced as the head coach, he was so determined to keep JKS that he was at the press conference, he got introduced, he got on a flight, he went all the way to Hawaii, where JKS is from, to meet with him in person and say, hey, we want you to be a guy, we want you to stick around. And he says, yeah, Cal's the place for me. So that's the first major recruiting win of the Tosh Lupoy era in Berkeley, to keep him around. Because, again, when you're trying to build, and I don't know that Cal has as much building, they don't need building so much as they need tweaking. They're a 7-5 football team. How many head coaches? I had to clear my throat there. How many head coaches are walking into situations in which their team at the Power 4 level just went 7-5? John Summerall's not doing that at Florida. Eric Morris is not doing that at Oklahoma State. Bob Chesney's not going to do that at UCLA. Alex Golesh isn't doing that at Auburn. Just keep going around. This could be the most immediate success, pending what happens with the transfer portal and how Tosh Lupoy fills out his staff. I think he is well qualified to be a good CEO head coach that recruits his tail off. That has always been his MO for his entire time being around college football. He is an alum of UC Berkeley, and I think that keeping JKS gives him the guy that he was looking to start with, and now he goes, okay, let's build around him. Because this is someone who has 2 years of college football left to play. It's like Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith would be the first receiver off the board tomorrow if the NFL draft were held. And he has to play another year of college football. Them's the rules. That's the way it goes. Well, JKS is going to be there for 2 years in Berkeley. Maybe the first year is a complete and utter disaster and he decides to go elsewhere. It felt, I talked about it at one point on the show as someone that felt like Miami's next quarterback or in Indiana could have gotten into the fold. SEC schools would have come calling. Instead, Tosh Lupoi got there and said, nope, we're locking this guy down. What can we get in NIL? We're throwing it at this kid, and now he gets to work. And there's certainly work to be done, but it's not a complete and utter disaster. And in the ACC, Duke just played in the ACC championship game. Don't tell me what's possible in that conference. So I think Tosh Lupoi could be trending up right now at Cal in a big way. And keeping JKS is not just big news for the Bears. That's big news for everybody else. Because he was a name that I definitely had my eye on as someone who could have entered the transfer market and made an immediate impact anywhere he goes. If he'd been the quarterback at Texas this year, Texas is a college football playoff team. Instead, Texas is 9-3, and they, like Notre Dame, are just on the outside looking in and complaining. So that's big news for the Bears. I still expect there to be some big names, and I think this market of transfer quarterbacks is going to be much stronger than it was last year. But JKS says he will not be going into the transfer portal. Notably, no one's ever gone back on their word before. I think he will stay. Based on what I've been told, he likes it there. Tosh Lupoi, good recruit. I think they'll be just fine. The same cannot be said for the fine folks up in Pullman. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets, usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch. Finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. So I've used Game Time on several occasions over the last couple of years to go to sporting events and comedy shows. I've had a great experience every single time. Found a great deal, knew exactly what to expect, got the tickets on my phone. Bingo, bango, bongo. It was great. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. So Jimmy Rogers leaves Washington State, and the Cougars will have their third head coach in 3 years when the 2026 season kicks off. This is an absolute punch in the gut, and frankly, a little bit lower than that. So over the last 2 seasons, Coug fans have had to endure the Pac-12 collapsing. They're getting left behind. They've gotten to be somewhat optimistic about the rebuild of the Pac-8 state conference that has been made. All 8 schools in the Pac-12 are indeed state schools because you've got Texas State, Utah State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State. I might have already said that. Oregon State, Washington State. It's all, you got to have a state to be in that particular conference. So the Pac-State conference has been built, and they've gotten to enjoy that a little. But their men's basketball coach got them to the NCAA tournament, and then he left. He left for a former Pac-12 school that didn't get left out of the Power Four. And then their head coach who said, yeah, I'm going to go to Wake Forest. He might be the ACC coach of the year. He might be co-coach of the year with Tony Elliott at Virginia. That's Jake Dickert, of course. Did an unbelievable job with the Demon Deacons this year. And then Jimmy Rogers comes in, and there is no other way to see that as it was a good hire. Dude was at South Dakota State. Of course, he was asked about and said the right things with regards to loyalty in his press conference, and here we are Right back where you started before you hired it. Now, Washington State gets to play a bowl game. At least they get to play a bowl game. Man, how much more can you take? How much more can you take as a fan? Even if you thought when Jimmy Rogers was hired, he probably won't be here forever. He's got the pedigree and the coaching trajectory to go somewhere else. Did you think it would happen this fast? Did you think it would be right now? Because it would have been nice to get at least 2, maybe 3 years out of him. Year 1 went incredibly well. They were one of several teams that I predicted record-wise right on the money. They went 6-6. It's a great first year. Ask Oregon State how hard it's been to be one of the 2 original Pac-12 schools over the last couple of years. They just had one of the worst seasons in Oregon State football history. They lost to Sam Houston at home. Washington State, meanwhile, was going toe-to-toe with Ole Miss in Virginia. So Jimmy Rogers was making a name for himself and was keeping the Washington State brand alive going into a year in which the Pac-12 can absolutely send a team to the college football playoff. We'll see what the format winds up being and how many the group of 5 can get in and how those changes come about. We'll probably find that out when this season comes to a close or close to it sometime in January, because they extended the deadline, of course, because they want to think about all this stuff, which I don't think is actually the worst idea. I think expanding the playoff is the worst idea. It's always the worst idea. But anyway, let's get back to the point here with the Cougs. I don't know how much more you can take as a Washington State fan. I hope it's a lot. I know those fans, and I know they care, but man, everybody's got a breaking point, right? There's a scene, a storyline really, in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which is a phenomenal television series. Really, really good. Starts out as a kid's show. It does not end as a kid's show. It doesn't. It's big boy television. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin are captured by some slavers on a planet. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, the entire series, is incredibly strong, powerful, cool, calm, collected under pressure. But then eventually, even as he's put into that horrific environment, it gets to be too much. You start to see his character break a little. And I hope Washington State fans haven't reached that sort of point. But even if you are the strongest willed, most passionate sports fan, how are you feeling? How do you feel anything but just despair and frustration, and just that the commitment you put in this year was for nothing? And Jake Dickert said all these things, and John Mateer said all these things, and then they all left, and they just left. And I don't know when it's going to stop. I don't know who you hire to stop the cycle. I've seen Rick Neuheisel get suggested. I've seen reporting that Chip Kelly has had some folks poke around. I don't know what's going to excite the fans in Pullman, but I know that I'm rooting for them. I hope they haven't reached that breaking point as Obi-Wan did in one of those episodes. I really do, because I know they love the Cougs up there. But man, it's hard to not feel used by Jimmy Rogers. And Jake Dickert said all this stuff, and then when he went through that whole process of, we're going to make this big offer to John Mateer, and it wasn't enough, he realized, I can't do this here. I got to go somewhere else. And he's clearly found something at Wake Forest, turned them around pretty quickly. And Washington State has to look from afar. And I think Jimmy Rogers will go to Iowa State. I think he'll have every chance to succeed. And if he does, Washington State fans are just forever going to be the Squidward meme. Looking at Patrick and SpongeBob down there through the window, you're just peering through the blinds like, oh, yeah, I remember when I had fun with things. Like, I really do hope that that Washington State fans continue to be resolved to make it work, because you're going into a conference now that has been rebuilt to the best of its ability and is indeed going to have a path to make the college football playoff. Washington State, we forget, under the late Mike Leach, RIP Pirate forever and always, and they were a win in the Apple Cup away from potentially going to the 4-team playoff. They were 10-1. They lost at home to the Huskies. But that program has been up there, and now look at where they're at. They feel like a springboard. So you contrast that with what has happened in Corvallis, where the Beavs have hired Jamarcus Shepard, and at least in the first week or so, he's injected energy and life into the program. And I'm sure Oregon State fans are just hoping he stays for a couple of years and lays some sort of good foundation. He's got a long way to go. So I don't think Jamarcus Shepard could turn that. If he does turn that around, yeah, he might leave. And this is just the unfortunate reality of being ridiculously relegated as Oregon State and Washington State have been, is anytime a coach has success, we're going to ask the question, well, somebody else is going to come hire him because someone else is going to notice. And they're going to say, hey, if you can win out there, you can definitely come and win out here. If Jimmy Rogers can win in year one with South Dakota State transfers to Washington State with that schedule, yeah, we feel like you can win here. Hard to argue with that logic. Yeah, if Jake Dicker can go win at Wake Forest or at Washington State in Pullman, we feel like he can win here at Wake Forest. Well, hard to argue with that because they were right. So, Coug fans, I wish I could give you a more optimistic look. I just don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like. I hope the conference can provide some stability. And you know what? Not just because it'd be kind of funny, but it might actually work out. I think you should consider hiring Jonathan Smith. I'd hire him before I hired Rick Neuheisel or Chip Kelly. Just saying. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.